Welcome to this final part of this final episode of season 2 of Murder with Friends. Today we're talking about Ted Bundy. I am joined by Jack Ruley. Now, Jack, in this final part, we have to talk about the weird turn of events that led to Ted Bundy being captured, and then him escaping from custody, and then him representing himself at trial, and then him being executed. But before he was executed, saying that the reason why he killed people was pornography. There's a lot to get into, but let's just start at the beginning, a very good place to start. So on August 16th, 1975, Ted Bundy was arrested for just suspicious driving activity by a Utah Highway Patrol officer.
He saw a cop and just peeled out like a dummy.
I know.
He's just like, I gotta go.
But this was enough into his murder.
Total barbaric animal state.
Not quite. I mean, not total animal state. Because I think Chi Omega was like when he really had devolved. But he definitely was
anxious.
He
was an
freaking
anxious
out.
fellow.
And then he gets pulled over, and you see that he has essentially what is a murder kit in his car.
It is illegal to have like robbery, there's a better term for it, but like breaking and entering, like tools.
Yeah.
If you have those in your possession, it's, don't comment and be like only in some states or whatever. It's illegal, you can't do it.
And even if it's not illegal, it's definitely worth coming in for questioning for, which the police officer does, because also his car matched the description of remember in part 2 I talked about the DeRanch kidnapping, and she was kidnapped and she was able to escape from Ted Bundy, but she was also able to give a detailed account of what his car looked like, the whole outfit of that vehicle, which Mick told us about also in part 2, and that what the guy looked like. And so there was enough going on here that police were saying, I think this guy could be connected. And indeed, when he was put up for a lineup, he was easily pointed out by her, just saying, yeah, this is totally the guy that did it. And then during this time, while they had him in custody, there was so much that was sort of suspicious that didn't add up about Ted Bundy that investigators from 5 separate states with unsolved cases and disappearances on their hands got together and started sharing information. And while this seems as though, yeah, duh, that's what you would do, this was still pretty groundbreaking at the time, because remember, this was before or just around the time that the BAU was establishing a database for serial killers and for all these violent offenders around the country, so that investigators had something to pull from. So they weren't just totally operating in the dark, and you'd have these killers that seemingly poofed, vanished into air just to go across state lines and continue the rampage of killing, which was kind of how Ted Bundy was outsmarting the system and getting away with it, because people weren't sharing information. Finally, investigators started doing that. And then on February 23rd, 1976, he stood trial for the kidnapping. And then on June 30th, he was sentenced to serve a minimum of 1 to a maximum of 15 years in Utah State Prison. And then in June 7th, they started connecting evidence, putting him together with other murders that had taken place in Colorado. And so he was extradited for the preliminary hearing of Karen Campbell. But here's where it gets weird. Since he was representing himself, because remember, he took like some classes in law school, so he was qualified. He wasn't in shackles, and so when he said, hey, I need to go look something up during a break at the library, because he had to look something up for his own trial, he ducked behind a bookcase and jumped out of a 2-story window and was gone.
I thought he did that in jail and was like, how easy was it to escape from jail in the 70s?
No, this was from a library.
Legitimately thought it was the jailhouse library, and he just like looked around and he was like, yo, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna jump.
Well,
I 100%, I thought that you could just be like, make any effort to get out of prison in the 70s and get away with it.
I believe it was the courthouse library, and we're gonna have a pop-up if I'm right or wrong or whatever that was, but I know that he did jump out of a 2-story window, and then he was just on the run for a while. He went up into the mountains, he broke into a hunting shed and got a rifle and a change of clothes, and people were looking for him, but then he doubled back down and started heading back towards Aspen, so it sort of confused all the people that were looking for him. But then after 6 days of wandering, and I mean, I guess he wasn't that good of a hunter, he wasn't surviving, and he didn't look great, and people knew that he was out there. He was recaptured, and then on December 30th, 1977, he makes his second escape. What's interesting about this is that a lot of people were saying that he probably would have been acquitted because there wasn't sufficient evidence in this particular murder, but because he wasn't that good of a lawyer, he still, I guess, didn't recognize that and decided he was gonna plan his escape. This escape was insane, Jack. Do you know about this escape?
Well, it's not even, we can explain the escape, but it's not the, oh, I'll only serve like even if this goes badly, I'll only serve a year. It's, I can't murder anyone right now. Like, I can't murder a girl, I have to escape. Like, the worry of being acquitted or serving, like, yeah, I can do 8 months, like, whatever. Like, I've murdered a bunch of people already, I just got 8 months, like, great, I'm crushing it. It's just there are no brunettes in this building. Like, I have to get out of it because he's an addict. He's chewing his own hand off to get out of the trap to go get more of his drug.
It's interesting. I think that there's certainly an element of that, but I also think part of it is too his narcissism, sort of in the sense, you people can't control me. You're not gonna lock me up. Yeah, like because I also think because he's so intensely compartmentalized these two parts of his life, I think there was that drug addict part of him where he was like, I gotta get my next fix, my next hit. He wouldn't, sleep. He wouldn't stop until he could murder again. He absolutely was driven by that compulsion. But then there's that other side of him too that was just, you guys are beneath me. You have nothing on me. I am not
the God complex thing.
I'm not
I have a right to do all this.
Yeah, you have no right to do all this. So he concocts this insane Shawshank Redemption-esque type escape where he, over months and months and months while he's behind bars, $500 gets smuggled into him. He also somehow comes about a saw and he saws his way into the ceiling and figures out his way around the prison ceiling. Now, prisoners were complaining during this like months period.
Hey, Ted Bundy's trying to break out of prison and they're like, we have a lot of paperwork right now.
Well, they weren't saying Ted Bundy, but they're like, there are weird noises in the ceiling at night. And they're like, shut up, you're a prisoner.
You're in jail.
Yeah, you're in jail, what do you guys know?
It's not comfortable to sleep. Can we get some white noise machines in here?
Yeah, be like, there's some noise at night and they're like, shut up.
It's a little spooky.
So this is what happens. December 30th, so 1977, it's around Christmas time. He's already made his path and he's mapped out what his escape would be and all that stuff. But he knows on December 30th that the jail manager or superintendent, warden, nope, that's the warden. I manage this jail. I'd like to speak to your manager about this jail. The warden.
There's a sawing sound. That's very frustrating.
The warden is out with his wife, and Ted Bundy goes into the ceiling, gets into the warden's office, finds a change of clothes there, and just walks out of the prison. Just walks out of the prison, and he's out.
I mean, that's the guy for effort.
Think about this. This is January 30th, 1977. Then the brutal
December 30th or January 30th?
December 30th. Did I say January 30th?
It's okay.
My head's all over the place. There's a lot to get into. December 30th, 1977, breaks out of jail. He finds his way to Florida through stealing.
From where?
This was in Colorado.
Colorado.
I mean, that's pretty.
That's a trek.
That's a trek. He finds his way to Florida, but by this time, this is when he's in his most animalistic state. January 15th, 1978, he's still on the loose. He goes on the spree at the Chi Omega sorority house. One of the most brutal scenes that you'll see or that you'll hear about. I think it's probably what makes him the most notorious because it's like you just set loose an absolute monster in this house, and he gets
he's been going through withdrawals. I
hadn't considered
sick,
that.
And this is the like, I haven't had my fix. I would be interested. I'm sure someone's written a book of he probably killed someone on that drive.
Yeah.
Just it's the like, just got out of jail, got to do my, like, I need a cold Budweiser and I have to murder a brunette. Like, Ted Bundy is such a, like, psychotic, obsessive murderer. I can't imagine he'd like get out of jail. How long was he in jail for?
I don't have that in front of me, but we'll have a pop-up right now.
Yeah, so he was in jail for this long.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine he's like, gotta get to Florida and then I'm picking this back up. Like,
yeah, no, I think that's what you hear. Any time that he took a long road trip, like for example, Vermont to Washington, that's where people will say that he probably killed before 1974 because that's how we understand Ted Bundy to be. Whenever there's like a missing persons case around that time that fits that description, if we know that Ted Bundy was on the road.
Every one of those people has a book written about like that person, like this is like a Bundy murder.
Right,
like,
right.
Sure,
No, there are absolutely books that have sort of speculated on, the Bundy murders, because he was so weirdly tight-lipped sometimes about certain kills, because he felt that was information that belonged to him. That those lives that he took were his, that they belonged to him. So he goes into the Chi Omega house. He leaves after just an absolute bloodbath in there, and then February 8th he would kill Kimberly Leach, who was totally outside of his victimology, from what we understand. She was a 12-year-old girl. He abducted her in broad daylight, and that's one of the murders that he would be very tight-lipped about, that he would be very weird about. Even, obviously he was guilty. There was so much evidence, especially after Chi Omega, that he was guilty, but he was still strange about talking and admitting his guilt to certain kills, and that was one of them. February 12th, he is finally apprehended after a weird scuffle with a police officer who, at this point in time, everyone knew that Ted Bundy was out on the loose. Everyone knew that you needed to stay away and be safe, because there was a crazed serial killer that was just killing people, that was just killing women.
I'd be interested to talk to people in that area or in those general areas, and how people talked about it and how people's like lifestyles changed because of it.
Right.
Yeah.
During this time where you just don't know, and you hear about like locking your doors, but that seems awfully like not safe enough when you have someone like Ted Bundy who's truly just lost it, Then July 24th, 1979, for the Chi Omega murders and all the evidence that was there, and Ted Bundy being this weird showmanship and proposing to his girlfriend at trial because it's technically a legal marriage.
He didn't propose to her, they got straight married.
Well, he proposed and then they got married.
It's quick.
Yeah, it was very quick engagement, very quick.
That's
Happened
nice.
on the stand.
People like that now, just like short engagement, do it at your murder trial. I'm sorry, it's such a dark, horrific topic that I feel so my like center of morality wants to like downplay like how like insanely horrific all of this was. Like, we did Jonestown, previous episode, and it was, at least these people died right away. Like, this is so brutal and horrific that it is how are we the same species as this guy? And it's either like, this is such a like a 1 in a billion individual. Like, this isn't, killing people is rad. It's a big rush. Like, Bundy is alone within his own class of serial killers.
Yeah, well, I think
so different.
That kind of takes us into our final video package, which is the conversation I want to get into with you, which is, why do we say that Ted Bundy was the most evil? Let's take a look.
Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends. These were the last words of Ted Bundy, addressed to his lawyer Jim Coleman and his minister Fred Lawrence. The Washington Post reported on the execution, quote, "With that, it was time. A last thick strap was pulled across Bundy's mouth and chin. The metal skull cap was bolted into place, its heavy black veil falling in front of the condemned man's face. An anonymous executioner pushed the button. 2,000 volts surged through the wires. Bundy's body tensed and his hands tightened into a clench. A tiny puff of smoke lifted from his right leg. Vital signs tested. A minute later, the machine was turned off and Bundy went limp. He was pronounced dead at 7:16 a.m. Across the way, a crowd was chanting, 'Burn, Bundy, burn!' A chorus that would echo into today. Ted Bundy remains at the top of every most evil listicle. Stories of his crimes still circulate in the shadowy corners of parties. He has become the barometer by which we measure other real-life villains. Why is it, though, that Bundy holds this place in our collective minds? What makes Theodore Robert Bundy truly the most evil?
So Jack, I turn the question over to you. I think undoubtedly Ted Bundy is the most notorious American serial killer. Why?
He feels so everyday. I think a lot of serial killers killed hookers, and then everyone gets to go, well, I'm not a hooker, so it doesn't matter. Like, that's very sad, but I don't really care. Or like the MO is so specifically all American girls. It's like white, brunette, college age girls. are the people, one, we like most want to protect. Like in all of our news, it's like that's the most like, how could this happen? And I think Bundy's everydayness and kind of like the banal nature of who he was focusing on made it, oh, that can actually happen to you. And he's all over the country. It's not like rural upstate New York. It's not like, oh, it's people that he knew or any of that. And obviously the nature of the crimes is so horrific and scandalous. But
I think it also plays into him being so articulate and so put together and smart in the interviews and in the courtroom when he represented himself. Outside of a few outbursts and little moments that you'll notice in interviews where someone in the comment section will time code like when he breaks character, which I always think is kind of eerie, he comes across as just so well-spoken and smart, and he can clearly, define what he wants us to believe, his motivations were or whatever. And then you start doing this sort of mental gymnastics that we've been doing here today, Jack, which is, how are we the same species? How did he not feel this remorse? How can he have a girlfriend that he dotes on that he is, is kind of weird with sometimes?
Okay relationship, like not great, but whatever.
And then also just turn around and do that. It doesn't make sense to us. And I think that, when you look at a Charles Manson or a Jeffrey Dahmer, you're like, oh, they seemed a little bit weird. But, a little bit is putting it mildly. But then when you look at like Ted Bundy, you're like, no, but wait, he was gonna be a lawyer. Like everything that we sort of understood and that he wanted us to understand about himself was so normal. So how can you be this absolute monster? How do we understand that?
I think on top of that, of how it's taking, he clearly has all the descriptors of being a horrific serial killer. I think a lot of him representing himself, he was cast into people's homes. Like he was on the radio. Like we have these audio clips of him talking for a long time with like, I think with other serial killers, we're not as intimately involved with their psyche as we are of like, you can just sit back and listen in the way that you can with Manson and a few of the big guys. It's always, oh, I can actually look into your brain. And when you hear Bundy speak regularly, articulately, seems to have it all together, I think it's even more frightening. Where with a guy like Manson, it's always like, you seem pretty effing weird, dude.
Yeah, like I obviously wouldn't trust you, but I think with Bundy, it's like, would I trust him?
If you played Ted Bundy, I'd be like, oh, who's this guy? And I'd be like, he's a crazy murderer. But if you just played me like an unknown Charles Manson thing, I'd be like, this guy might be a psychopath. Like you know that immediately. You have that like visceral, like subsonic terror.
Yeah.
But he just didn't have that. It was just a man snapping, just a man having a bad day. But the extent that he took that to is infamous and will be forever.
Yeah. All right, well, that's all the time that we have to get into Ted Bundy. There is so much more that we could talk about, so I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's it for season 2 of Murder with Friends. We are gonna be taking a break, but during this time, we're gonna be reading all your comments and figuring out ways that we can make the show grow and be better than ever before. Thank you so much for tuning in for this season. We will be back. Appreciate all the support. Kind of don't wanna sign off yet because I'm just gonna miss doing it. So thank you to Jack, thank you to you guys. Thanks for watching Murder with Friends, and we'll see you next season.